Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be reviewing to you the Aladdin segments of the Disney's classic games Aladdin and the Lion King collection for the Nintendo Switch. I tried really hard to play the Lion King, but I couldn't get past level 2 because it was so frustrating. So I'll just let the completionist's episode speak for itself. If even he was frustrated by playing it, then there's no way I have the patience, and I'm not a completionist. So, at first glance, the amount of goodies they have in the Aladdin segment is worthy of squealing in joy. They have an in-game soundtrack. You can even choose to shuffle the songs if you wish. And it has the full soundtrack for the Sega Genesis version, as well as a really cool museum that gives you lots of goodies such as concept art, interviews with the developers, and even a way to compare the 1993 movie with the video game so that you can see, oh wow, this follows the plot nicely and this is where it deviates to make it more make sense for a video game audience. However, it's once you actually start playing the game that problems arise. So, first things first, there's actually 6 versions of Aladdin to play in this collection, which is really impressive, and I wish more classic games compilations would take this route. Let me see if I could name all of them off the top of my head. So you've got the regular Sega Genesis version, you've also got the demo version that was unfinished, but yet you can still play about 3 levels of it. Then you've got the Japanese version, which is basically the same as the American version, except everything's in Japanese. Well, not everything. Some of the dialogue is, but some of it, like the level complete menu, is still in English. Then you've got... You can do this, Paul. The Final Cut edition, which is probably the most impressive because it's basically a director's cut version of the Genesis game that was built as if the developers had more time to make changes such as camera controls and various bug fixes while still feeling like a Genesis game. Man, I think that'd be really cool if they did that for other games, such as maybe if we saw the fabled Ura Zelda that was cancelled. And finally, last but certainly not least, there's also the 2 handheld versions of the game, one in color and one in black and white. So the main premise of all of the games is that you control Aladdin in a side-scrolling 2D platformer. Aladdin's abilities are jump, duh, it's a platformer, swing his sword, and throw apples. You can swing your sword as much as you like, but you really have to watch your quantity of apples, as you only have 99 as max, which doesn't happen very much unless you're really stingy with throwing them. You better get used to it eventually, because some of the bosses won't go down unless you throw apples at them, which is weird, because you'd think they'd go down more if you stuck a sword in them, but whatever, video game logic. Then you go through various levels that are inspired by parts of the movie, and some of which can get a bit exaggerated. Like, there's a whole level based on the Genie, which doesn't really happen in the movie, but I guess it's based on the Friends Like Me song. So you jump across various Genie-like contraptions. At first, the levels seem really ingenious, but as you go further, they get into some frustrating level designs that's so early 90s. A lot of one-hit kills and bottomless pits await you the further you get into the game, and the final boss is just a joke. But what's even more of a joke is once you get to the handheld versions, which are basically trying to emulate the level design and animations of the Genesis version, but they fail so miserably because of the weaker hardware that the game runs terribly. I swear, this is actual footage from the game. This is not my capture card going crazy. It actually does run this slow because the Game Boy just can't keep up with Sega's advanced hardware. Oh, if only the days of the Nintendo-Sega rivalry were back, because then we'd hear Sega still does what Nintendo don't. The Game Boy version feels like it's mostly the same, albeit the terrible frame rate and lack of color. But the main difference is that you have to switch between swinging the sword and throwing apples because of the lack of buttons. This can be really frustrating because it didn't seem like it worked all that much for me, even though the watch it section basically made it seem seamless. But then again, I guess whenever you're watching a developer's cut, that kind of does that. For most of the versions of the game, sadly not all of them, but most of them, you can choose to watch it like you're watching a movie and then just pick up and play where you want, kind of like Nintendo Super Guides, which is actually what I'm doing here. And, like I said, you can also turn on invincibility, but this doesn't apply to all versions. For instance, it doesn't apply to the handheld version for some reason. Thankfully, each version has multiple control settings that you can do, which is nice. But overall, the scaling difficulty that gets just brutally hard as you go along prevents me from giving this an easy recommendation. With my new 0 out of 20 rating system that I incorporated for 2020, since this is the year of perfect vision, I'm going to say if you're playing these just to play it, this is more like a 6 out of 20 for me. The games start out cool and they have good music, but there's not too much more redeeming factors besides that. However, if you're a collection-aholic and you really have a lot of nostalgia for the old Aladdin video games, then this is more like, I guess, a 12 out of 20, because you do get a lot of historical value, especially from the previously unplayable versions of the game. However, if you're in it just because you're like, ooh, nostalgia, there are better ways to do it. Especially if you can find the Super Nintendo version, which has a lot of enhancements that neither of these versions were able to do. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or critiques. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and don't pander too much to nostalgia, because sometimes that can lead to disastrous results. Bye for now.